Well,
in that sense.
because at some point they're like, wait, you're buying all of this stuff from us.
How many uncles do you have? How many uncles do you have? And why do they need so many leather jackets in Brazil?
And now, Escaping the Drift, the show designed to get you from where you are to where you want to be. I'm John Gafford, and I have a knack for getting extraordinary achievers to drop their secrets to help you on a path to greatness. So stop drifting along, escape the drift, and it's time to start right now. Back again for another episode of the podcast of, like it says in the opening, man, gets you from where you are to where you want to be. And today, people, beamed through the interwebs live into the studio, I got a cat that has invented something pretty cool. It is and no, it's not going to be an infomercial if you're thinking that. That's not what we do. We do not take paid placement on this show. It's not how this works. I just genuinely thought this was pretty cool, and I want to talk to the guy about it. So he is the CEO of a company called Mode Mobile, where he has created a way. His goal in life, what he's trying to do, is stop the income disparity, the wage gap, by allowing you to take your cell phone and turn it into a tool that makes money. So let's talk to him. Let's get the ins and outs of that business and learn all about them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. This is Dan Noveas. Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, John. Appreciate it.
You're good. Welcome, man. So, dude, entrepreneurship is not something that is new for you. It's not something you just started. This is something you've been doing your whole life, right?
I've been, doing businesses ever since I was in high school. So it's just kind of like in the DNA. And even before I knew the word entrepreneurship was, I have these little tricks that I would do, I guess, as a kid, to try and make a couple extra bucks, I guess.
What did your parents do that would cause you to be born an entrepreneur? Tell me about you growing up.
I grew up, my parents weren't necessarily entrepreneurs. They were like parents, though, that did allow me to have, I think, a lot of freedom relative to my friends. Like I never had a curfew. I never had those type of kind of like rule sets. It was very independence driven. So I think that was helpful. I think actually where the entrepreneurship really came was, I grew up through two very different environments my whole life. I grew up in Southern Indiana and Sao Paulo, Brazil, where I'm from originally. My family's from Brazil, and the very different places. And I think the areas that I really started to really notice that difference as I was like in my early, teen years or, going into like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, was that, things in Brazil were actually way more expensive, like things that I cared about, at least like, like an Xbox or a car or whatever, because of this insane import tax. And every time I'd go back to, Brazil, my family would be like, oh, can you bring like all of these electronics?
Sure.
I'm like, why? And so, you realize that and you're like, wow, like these are two places that as a kid, you realize are, to me, they're different, but they're also the same. It's like just people that I'm dealing with. But then I thought, wow, there's like, I could sell this stuff here, make a profit, vice versa. I could take stuff here and sell it there. And that's how my first businesses started. And, by the time I was a senior in college or in high school, I was doing a couple $1 million a year in revenue, from one of those businesses.
Just simply arbitraging electronics from here to Brazil.
That's where it started in Brazil. So basically, the thesis was like, I was like a eBay, at the time, a titanium power seller, which, for me was like a big title, back in the day. And where it all started was, I had a part-time job that I was working at Polo. At the time, I had just gotten a car. And my dad was like, listen, I'm not going to pay for all these extra things that you want in your car. You want a sound system, all that stuff. You need to get a job. And so I got a job at Polo, worked for a week, got like a $70 paycheck. And I had this like aha moment when this like tour bus of, foreigners came from, they were coming from Japan, I believe, because there's a Toyota factory by my town. And they spent $40,000 on that day at that store. And it was just me and one other kid that was there. I'm thinking I'm going to get this great reward for like, dealing with all this on a random Sunday. And I got a $5 like Arby's gift card. That was like my reward, and I was super pumped. And then I got that and I was like really upset, but at the time I had this 40% discount at the store. And I was like, man, if I just gave them 20%, I could have made $8K, and then, not that would have worked exactly like that where I sold my discount to them, but that's where I had an aha moment. I was like, oh, why don't I just buy some of these items and then I'll sell them on eBay? And so I walked around the entire store. I had a Palm Trio at the time, and it was like the smartphone of the time. And I was like taking a picture of the Palm Trio 600p. And so I would like take the pictures, get the serial numbers, and then I cross-reference, found this jacket. And this one leather jacket was like selling there at the store for $180 at this factory and outlet. And online, it was like $380. I bought 3 on an emergency credit card, kept the receipt, my dad's emergency card. And by the next day, I had sold all 3, and I made $680 or something. And I was like, what the hell just happened? I just made more money in this day that I had made the entire month of me working here times 5, right? And so I think that that's like where that started thinking. And then I was like, oh, well, why don't I sell these items in Brazil? It's worth even more there. And so over the course of the next 5 months, I made like 30 grand in profit just by reselling polo stuff. Eventually had to leave that job, right? It's not a sustainable model in that sense.
Because at some point they're like, wait, you're buying all of this stuff from us.
How many uncles do you have? How many uncles do you have? And why do they need so many leather jackets in Brazil? And so it was excessive. But it was like the initial, I think, starting capital to get started. And then, and where I started really noticing why I moved into electronics, it was like at the time is like when Apple iPod was getting really big and all this stuff. Internationally, this isn't as much of a supply chain issue now, but back then, this is like almost 20 years ago, or probably 20 years ago, typically electronics would come out in America first. And then everywhere else, it was like 3 to 6 months later. So in addition to that arbitrage that already occurs based on currency arbitrage, there was also the delay. And so I could be the first person selling something and then basically sell it to the wealthiest people of that country. And then I saw that would be true in the UK, in Australia. You could buy electronics and then unlock the phones, like smartphones. You could buy like bricked phones that people didn't pay their bills on Verizon and AT&T, Verizon and Sprint at the time here, and you can make a couple $100. So that's kind of like how the business started. And I literally, set up a warehouse in the UK. Then I moved to Australia. I did the same thing. And I was like hiring like my taxi cab driver, I lived in Australia for 6 months in college, and I literally hired a cab driver that was just like a good guy I met. We interviewed him, and then, that's how I was setting this stuff up. So, that's where it all started. But then, got into software after that, and there was a whole long story of how we did that. But I think that's where the foundation of entrepreneurship went, and kind of what was going through my head at the time was, that this was like for me, I didn't know, I didn't want to work a regular job, and I really came to that realization probably like my sophomore, junior year of college, where it confirmed after like 2 internships that it just wasn't made for me, I guess.
Well, I like to say that all great entrepreneurs are chronically unemployable. So that's not a surprising part of that story whatsoever. To be great at this, you just can't be able to work for somebody else. It's part of how it works. So you said you were doing this, and then you branched into software. You said it's a long story. Good news is we got time. So how did you make so that was the first pivot, was into software?
Honestly, dude, the way that happened, it was like, I don't know. Oftentimes the worst things in your life are usually the best things for you, I guess. So at the time, I did a bunch of different businesses in college while running this company. I had a screen printing business. I had started a college music website before Spotify, and we were getting about 1 million people a month listening to my music playlist. It wasn't making a ton of money though, but right around this time, I remember I was sleeping, which was fine. My warehouse. Okay, I get an email from our worker there, and the warehouse was robbed. Completely. I didn't have any insurance on it or anything, and this is. I didn't have credit or anything, so this is all my money. I mean, it wasn't all my money, but I'm saying it's probably like 70% of my money. And apparently, like there was a FedEx guy that then and then this warehouse got robbed in the UK, and he was so apologetic, but really there was no recourse, right? And I remember thinking to myself, man, I just like wiped out like 70% of everything I've ever worked for. At the time, I'm now living in Chicago. I'm 22 years old. I just had graduated. And I was like, how do I prevent this from happening? I was like, what a hassle. Because the thing with electronics is you might do a lot of revenue, but your margin's like maybe 10%, 10, 15%. You're not making a lot of money on the stuff. And so that was a huge hit to me. And so I was like, well, if I do software, not thinking about hackers, right? But I was just like, if I do software, that would not be possible, right? Mm-hmm. And so at the time, it was kind of like the iPhone was starting to get really big. App Store was getting really big. A lot of the traffic that we were having on their site was on desktop. So I was like, oh, I should make an iPhone app. I actually went on Fiverr. If you know the website where you get anything for $5,
sure.
Found someone that had posted a listing that was like, hey, I'll make an app for $5. So it sounds very promising, definitely. But yeah, hit him up and was like, hey, this is what I want. And then he was like, I can't make that for $5, but I'll make it for $85. I'm like, you know what? That's a great deal. Well, let's do it. was like, didn't really have any expectation for it. 6 weeks later, we're Skype friends at this point in time. I get an app, and the app actually works. Not the best app I've ever seen. I posted on the App Store, and we sent it out to the audience, and I made like 10 grand, right, in like 3 days. I was like, this is an insane return on investment. There's people.
What was the functionality? What did it do?
So initially it was supposed to play music as like a music streaming app, but he didn't know how to do that. So what it did is it preloaded 10 songs, and then it was like, that game that you would play on, your kind of like Microsoft, where it's like a little puzzle and you got to clean up the puzzle. So it's like a picture that's all broken,
right?
And stuff. It was like early PC days. Anyways, that's all it did. And it had like, 20 of the favorite of the songs that people liked. And it would just kind of like, kind of like a stupid game that was in there. That was kind of like a hybrid of a music and game. Very simple. But honestly, had made that 10K very quickly and was every day making a couple $100. I'm like, dude, I'm making more money on this. And I did this with a guy from Fiverr, who turns out, is my co-founder still to this day. It turns out it was a 17-year-old kid in high school that was about to graduate high school in the UK. And, he was on Fiverr because it was his first ever project. He had just learned a code, didn't really, believe in his skills, and just wanted to work on a project. And then I was like, hey, listen, like I just graduated. You're about to go to college. Why don't you take a gap year? Come move to Chicago. I was living in Chicago at the time. And I had this idea. We're going to create apps without coding for people. And he did it. Like took a gap year and like came. His parents allowed him. And we then started this company. We proceeded to struggle for a year. It's not like that story of like, and then everything happened and it was great. But we started making a little bit of money towards the end. But at the end, he was like, I can't take another gap year and we're not making enough for me to be sustainable. So I'm willing to work on this part-time, but I got to go back to college. Right. Mm-hmm. So after that year, that's what happened.
Dude, what's funny about, I'm going to tell you something funny about that particular story you just told, which is one of my best friends is the founder of a company called VShred, which you've probably seen all over your social media. And his partner in that business is an English kid that he met exactly the same way.
On Fiverr?
No, I don't know if it was Fiverr, but he just met this kid in England that was he just met this kid that was gifted with ad buying. And he was a kid, and he was just like, why don't you move to America? Let's take a shot at this. There you go. And here we are now. They have $1 billion company. So yeah, pretty impressive.
That's amazing.
What they're able to do. But but literally the exact same story. So I guess if you're listening to this, if you want to start a great business, you got to find a high school kid in England, because this is the second time I've heard this story. It's literally the second time I've heard this. Okay, there we go. All right, keep going. Sorry.
So it was a crazy time. We became friends, and then he like goes back to have his freshman year, like freshman week, like it's like super fun, whatever. And he's like, but I'm down this 1 week to kind of build this app. And I was like, listen, I have this other idea for an app. I think we can knock it out in 1 week. Let's try it out. And he's like, okay, I'm down. So we launched this app, and it was basically Instagram had just gotten acquired by Facebook, right? It was like that $1 billion acquisition at the time, but it was still relatively, small compared to what it is today. This app was the first ever app that basically created Instagram as like an exchange system, meaning you could upload your photo and you could like someone's photo, or you can follow them and you get a certain amount of coins for those actions, or you can just buy coins. At the time, the way the algorithm worked on Instagram is the most likes, most follows gets to the popular page. Once you get to the popular page, you get a ton of organic reach. Yeah. It doesn't work like that anymore. This app basically was the first time that you could do that without like bots, right? And this app went out, and the first day it came out, there was like 4 hours left in the day, and every 24 hours the clock resets, and it made like $700. I thought it was a glitch. I was like, someone came in here and probably went insane, bought that. The next day I see it rising through the charts, like we're at like number 4, in the paid charts. And the next day it made like 12 grand, right? And then the next day it made 20 grand, right? And it was just organically growing, had this really nice viral loop. And then we were the 65th highest grossing app in the entire app store. And so every day we're making like $20,000 profit, on this product. And it got to a point that I was like, look, I think you should drop out of school. We should like keep building other apps. And he's like, listen, I can't get a visa because I don't have a college degree. And so he's like, if we raise an investment round, we can get a special visa called the O1A visa. It's like people of extraordinary ability. And so then I went out to go try and raise money, and we were able to raise $1.5 million. We got Mark Cuban to become an advisor in the business as well at the time. And he dropped out of school, and then we started this company. 3 or 4 months into that app, Facebook tried to sue us. They were like, they sent us a cease and desist. They didn't actually sue us because we were like using their private API. They didn't like what we were doing. And so we kind of adjusted the way that worked. But ultimately, that's how we got started in software, and then kind of ran a lot of different apps, through the years. And, that kind of led to, what we do now with Mode is kind of all that learning, all those different businesses. And we sold a lot of the App Studio and apps to, other people along the way. But that's kind of like the story of those, early 20s and the pivots along the way.
All right. Just so for those folks that are listening, right? How many dogs did you have? I mean, did you guys just literally go on a streak of winners, or were there a couple just dogs?
I mean, the app builder was the entire thesis of that business. It's not that it was like that business. Some people made it work. Like I just like wasn't built to be a founder, I think, like that, because I was like, I've always been a mass consumer founder. I would say like every business I've ever operated has been like a B2C business focused on getting consumers in the door. That's like what I'm good at. That's what I like to do. So that didn't work. And like and then you have this consumer app, and that provided the capital. Then we were like, oh, okay, let's make all these other apps. And we did these like celebrity apps. We were like the first ones to use, like, we were going like Vine Kids, at the time Vine was big. So we were really ahead of a lot of trends, and some of them made that money, but not to the scale of that first Instaliker app. And that was actually a big life lesson, I would say, because if we just would have focused on like some of the core value props that we were doing, instead of like wanting to like aim for $1 billion outcome instead of like a several million or 8-figure, but I was like so enamored with $1 billion outcome. And I just couldn't make it happen. And so eventually though, it did lead to what became this business. So I would say probably like 20, dude. Like honestly, this company has almost failed 20 different times. And even as early as a few years ago, like you're still dealing with those ups and downs because it's anything but easy, and then just when you think something's going great, in 2021, 2022, we had like an insane, even with Mode, our current business, like an insane growth rate, and everything's going because at the time we were making a ton of revenue off of like, crypto companies and financial like neobanks that were super high valued, and money's cheap. So everyone wants to go public. So they're spending a ton of money on marketing. And that's how we make money is, brands paying us effectively for marketing. Mm-hmm. And, in 2022, FTX happens, all this other stuff happens. Voyager goes bankrupt. That was one of our biggest clients. They owed us millions of dollars. And suddenly my revenue goes away and my business almost like, tanks. So that idea wasn't a dog, but it was also like the concept of what we were doing was working, but the market landscape changed. And, the errors that I made was like revenue concentration. Like, oh, if 70% of your revenue is coming from like, 6 or 7 different people, and then they're all in the same industry, something happens, it can completely take you down. 100%. And so you learn these things along the way of diversification and how to build a business so that you don't fail. And I think every year that you don't die, effectively, the likelihood of your success like infinitely scales because you just get so much wiser, of how you operate.
Yeah. So what was the idea? Who came up with the idea for the current company, the current iteration of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, with Mode. So this is how essentially it started. We had created a concept. So obviously we were in the app builder space. Mm-hmm. We kind of went from the start of the app kind of like boom, which was everyone wants an app, to everyone's like, we don't need any more apps. Like honestly, if the restaurant down the street gets an app, like I'm going to have to freak out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want to download that app. And so then I was like, oh, okay, well, we should build a kind of a super app that kind of brings all these services in one place. And then we focused specifically on media at the time. And so what ours specifically did was like, we aggregated all the music services into one place. So SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, all that stuff. And it was this idea of like a multimedia, all the super apps, all those apps within it. Ultimately it didn't work. There was only one type of user using it. And this is actually how the idea started, is that we asked these people, why are you using this product? And they all had one thing in common. They didn't pay for subscriptions. So they liked that it was free and that you can stream unlimited music. And at the time, the APIs of these services, so how we integrated, they didn't show ads in them. So it was like a weird hack to have an ad-free app experience with a huge library. And obviously it does, they could change that at any minute. It was just like unfortunate for us at the time. And then we asked them like, why don't you pay? And it's like, oh, because, budget conscious or whatever it might be. And they tend to have more time than they had money. So we were like, oh, well, what if we paid you to listen to music? Like, would you be interested in that? And then everyone was like, yes, very interested in that. So we just put up a landing page. I don't know if you used to use Robinhood when it first came out, but they had this like referral mechanism that, you could jump the line into it and they get like literally millions of installs on that. Mm-hmm. So we just put up a landing page. I was like, hey, we'll pay you to listen to music. And we had like 250,000 people sign up in a matter of like, weeks. And so we're like, okay, there's something here for sure. And so we focused the entire business on paying you to listen to music. Problem is that music is like a horrible business. And it's really hard to make money doing that. So then that's how we moved into like gaming. And then we moved into other types of activities that you would do on the phone. And before we knew it, we're like, really what we're building is like an operating system on the phone, focus on everything you do that rewards you, right? And then we're earning money to play games, to shop, to stream music, read the news, charge your phone. And so then that's how the whole concept was formed around EarnPhone. And, rewarding you for everything you do on this device and the 40 hours that you spend on average on your smartphone, that's only going up.
So when you say that when you say you get paid for everything, so who's writing the check for this? Like who's actually paying? Yeah. Right? Obviously it's advertising, obviously, but is it is it individual advertisers or the people that actually own the services that are being used? Because then they're making money on advertising.
Yeah. So the way to kind of think about it is like, there are direct advertisers that will work with us. I mean, when you advertise, there's always a goal, right? And for your podcast, it might be you want people to download your podcast, you want awareness, so you're willing to spend money on that. For brands, the same thing, right? So if it's a game like a Candy Crush or something like that, they want you to play their game and basically create a habit playing that game. And over time, you'll either see a lot of ads and they'll monetize that way, or you'll buy stuff in the game. And so, they'll pay us a certain percentage, just like they would Facebook. The only difference is that we reward the user per minute they play Candy Crush for a period of like a week or something like that. Mm-hmm. Vice versa, if it's like Robinhood is like the client, which we work with, their goal is for you to deposit $5 into a trading account. And with that, they're willing to pay like $100, say. And so we'll take that $100 and we'll say, hey, user, if you deposit $5 into a brokerage account, we'll give you an extra $50. Robinhood will give you $50 in free stock as well. So you get $100 for opening up your account here. So that's how you align value, because we're taking a little bit of that. You're sharing a little bit with the user, and then you're aligning the value with the advertiser.
Well, it's kind of
effectively how the model works.
Yeah, it's kind of a digital affiliate program is essentially what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think like what you'll see is like, reward models are becoming way more like in the know now, I'd say. I think they were like, when we started this business, these kind of like make money products or reward products were kind of like, gimmicky, I think. Mm-hmm. And, there's still like advancements that are kind of happening. But if you just think about the amount of time that people are spending on, these devices, I mean, your attention and data is effectively, being utilized to make $1 trillion businesses. And so we're just kind of sharing that value back with the user and just doing in every facet of your life that you could possibly think of.
So, I mean, you guys currently have like 45 million users or something crazy right now?
Yeah, we've had over 45 million people download and use our products from around the world. I mean, a good portion of that is also international, which is, we still kind of count as like a beta kind of program, because it just shows the interest, right? At the end of the day, because, in order for us to be really successful at what we're doing, you need to have the advertisers, because the advertisers are essentially, the ones that are kind of filling the bill, for those users. But, most of that is organic, in that sense. But we've had over 45 million, people install, use this product. And now the business is starting to acquire other assets and companies because, we're essentially in the business of sending you to use like the new TikTok app or the new game or whatever. Mm-hmm. And now we see an opportunity of being like, well, there are the TikToks out there, but there's like a ton of these like utility apps that are like a little game or some photo filter app or, whatever. And we could buy those apps, send users into those products. And then now we capture all of that lifetime value along the way. So it's almost like the PE like roll-up model as well. Mm-hmm. That's kind of been very profitable. And then, we're finding good cash line businesses and, we bring them into the Mode umbrella.
I have an interesting question based on what's going on in the world right now, because this could be, it could be part of the equation, which is this, and you would kind of know, are your international users worth the same to your investors as US? Do they value them more or less, international users versus your US based users?
US users are, it's in the value of kind of like lifetime value, US is the highest. And the reason being is just because fundamentally, the ad markets here are just the most advanced. The income per capita is the highest in the United States, and so you generally see it correlate to each country. Now, here's the thing that's like really interesting, though. In the U.S., right now our focus is on Android because generally that's more of a budget conscious population. But in the U.S., like the ratio is like 50-50, right? Whereas if you go to a country like Brazil or India or South Africa, whatever, you're going to get like 99% penetration for Android. So we just have a lot more people in those countries. If in worldwide, I think if you look, it's like 1.2 billion devices or so are iPhones, and there's like 6 billion of everything else, right? And so it's just like a lot more people are using Android devices. And so, there's nice arbitrages to be made because some markets are more efficient than others.
Well, the reason I asked that was because, I've said on this program since the tariff war started that, the U.S. consumer is the best commodity on earth. If you look at big business, it's worth more than anything else on earth.
Yes.
Because the value of that. And I was just curious if in your model with your advertisers, if they said like, okay, if it's US, we'll pay more for it because the long-term value of that is higher. Or if it's international, we're going to give you a little less because we know we're probably going to get a little less on that.
Yeah, it's for sure like that. And, even countries like Canada, UK, Australia, it's still like 80% of what you get in the US generally. It follows that pattern, essentially.
So you've gotten some joint partnerships or some deals done with some big box brands. Some big companies. Best Buy and Walmart and those things. How did you get those deals done?
Man, honestly, it was every which way, I think, is the right answer here, because it was like not something I had. I guess like taking a step back, like the thesis behind this was we started out as a software company and we're still a software company. I think one of the misconceptions that we're a hardware company. I think the main idea behind the phone was like literally that when it came to that conclusion that what we're doing is effectively an EarnOS, and what I wanted to test out is kind of like if someone bought a phone. That's value proposition was that, hey, you're going to get paid to use your phone. Would that change the earning habit of someone, right? And also, the time you first open up a device, there's all these new apps that you install, right? And each time that happens, advertisers have to pay for that, right? So as opposed to when someone downloads our app and you already have Facebook on there's no way I can monetize that action, right? And so that was like the thesis behind why we launched EarnPhone. And we launched the first one. We only made 5,000 devices and we just launched it to our own users and we sold out of it. We didn't have it in any stores, nothing. And it's not like, we just try to do it in the most scrappy way possible. We then did the second device. I was like, okay, this one we want to get into stores. And the main reason why we wanted to do that is just to also show that the model is possible because, our vision as a business is actually not to be, it's more to be like Roku. If you're familiar with Roku, the streaming service, what Roku was able to do in 2015, like they had like 7 attempts to go public and it failed every time. And then in 2015, they like really hit it. And what they did differently, and, now they're $10 billion+ business, is effectively they license their software to TV makers like TCL, Panasonic, etc., and they get access to that distribution. So let the people that are great at manufacturing distribution, and then they do a rev share on your streaming habits and things of that nature. And so that's what we wanted to do. The problem is that anytime I went to a big carrier or phone maker, it was just such an out of out of box model that people just didn't believe it was possible. And when they see it's an app, they're just kind of like, I don't really want to do that. And so when we put it in this,
just put in the app store.
Yeah. And then they were just like, it just didn't have any credibility. So we're like, we're going to launch it into the stores like Walmart, Best Buy, show the data, show it's possible. And that was the whole thesis. It wasn't to get a ton of distribution because, of those 45 million, we're talking about tens of thousands of devices. We're talking about tens of millions of installs, right? And so the play there was just to show, hey, look, this cohort of user, this is what happens when you have an EarnPhone. This is what happens even with like our device, which is definitely not as good as like a Samsung device or our device because I haven't been in manufacturing for like 30 years, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you can show that people are interested in it. And that's really the future of Mode, is really kind of this idea where we're going to see things like an AT&T EarnPhone or a Samsung EarnPhone or a Motorola EarnPhone or in other countries where, there's phone makers that you've never even heard of here in America, like Oppo or Vivo, that are literally like insanely like tens of billions of dollars business, but they're the market leaders in India or they're the market leaders in Africa. And so that allows us to license that to those people. They then launch EarnPhones in their own country. And that allows us to really kind of take over that model and be basically the creators of that EarnPhone idea, just very similar to how Roku did for smart TV.
What prohibits Apple from slitting your throat?
Well, I mean, Apple is, they're not really, it's kind of a different core market, I guess, because, people that have iPhones, like, they're not as budget conscious. I mean, if you're spending your entire month's rent, like a flagship device right now, it's like 2 Gs, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. Like if you use this product for the entire year, you'll be able to pay for your iPhone and that stuff. And obviously it's a good market. Like, don't get me wrong. We have solutions that we're thinking about actually of what we want to launch for iPhone and that category, but it just wasn't our focus area. And even on the Android side, I think that, the general idea is like, to build this business and to do it in the way that we've done it, it's very complex. It's not an easy business model to actually operate in because you're effectively creating money out of thin air. But I think the way that we also went about it was like, I don't see other reward products or survey apps or whatever as like competitors. My goal as a business is like, how do I create the most value for you, through earnings and savings and, value. And, because those people want our users, they're going to pay, reward or money to us that allows us to increase their rewards. And if you can earn from their product, great. Like, you should definitely do that. And so that's kind of like how the thesis of the business operates, and why we kind of see that, other companies want to work with us as opposed to like compete. Many people have tried to do this model. It's just not very easy to make actually work as a whole.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, dude, you've run up a giant business. Let's go back a little bit and talk about how you scaled. Let's talk about operationally scaling. How many people do you have now? How many employees do you have now?
Yeah. Team members, we have a little over like 60, 65 or so employees. We have a lot of more part-time people as well. Like, we're fully remote model. So, after COVID, we decided to fully operate in that way. And so, we operate super lean. You know what I mean? I think that's the one thing that you learn, from those hardships along the way, is how to make, like, some of our OKRs internally is like revenue per team member. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we have goals, like, what is the revenue per team member? And then if it starts getting out of whack, then, you have to, either create more revenue or be like, hey, look, are we being as efficient as we possibly need to be? But yeah, I mean, those are, kind of how we think about it.
What's more important in your business model is I always call it offense and defense, right? Because you need, like, offensive money would be generating new relationships and generating new revenue channels. And then defense would be the developers that are making sure your clients get a great experience or constantly improving. What is your mix on offense to defense on your spend?
Yeah, I mean, people spend my highest cost is engineering and product because, fundamentally, like, we have certain business models or the way to kind of think about Mode is like, we actually have 3 different divisions in our business. We kind of have like a media division, a mobile division, which is our core business. And then we have like now this like money division, which is kind of like some of the stuff we're doing within like the financial services space. But, and some of those divisions are way more profitable than others because they're almost like, be able to use the resources. Like, I'll give you an example, like, when we were trying to find new revenue outlets, and after that whole thing debacle in 2022 that we had to kind of really pivot the business and find new revenues, we realized, hey, we have like 45 million emails that people, came into our service. And what do we know about these people? If you like to earn and save, okay, let's create some newsletters to basically tell them about earnings and savings. And now that's a mid 7-figure a year business for us with extremely high gross margin, because all we're doing is doing something that like literally would just be an afterthought as a business person. Like, I wasn't even monetizing emails, at that time. And then it's turned into something. So, that's kind of like, obviously that business line, maybe they're way more offensive on like sales and kind of getting new advertisers in. But the core business, you have to invest in like research and development. You're like, if I wanted to operate just for pure profits, only profits, like, we wouldn't need the amount of engineering and kind of product team that you have. But now we're very disciplined on like, okay, how do we spend and where do we want to make those investments and how long are we willing to wait before an investment comes in? return on a specific product area. And I think the other thing too is like, 2022, the way you operate your company, 2021, 2022, with like the SoftBanks of the world kind of putting in, $200 million rounds, it was like growth at all costs. Growth at all costs, IPO, whatever. And then all the growth investors were basically underwater.
Whatever you do, don't turn a profit. Just don't make money. Whatever you do, don't make any money.
Yeah. Investor valuation up, right? And now it's like the opposite. Yeah, now it's the opposite. And I don't know, we had to change a lot of our like even the payback cycle. Like we used to wait like 6 to 9 months before we even got break even. And now it's like 45 days or less, that we wait to basically, turn a profit on the acquisition cost of a user versus,
6 to 9 months. Well, I was going to say, because you've got to be at a place now where you're being approached at people that want to be part of what you're doing from an advertiser standpoint. Like you guys have got to be big enough now where the inbound calls are probably greater than the outbound calls, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's both. You're getting inbound calls for sure, but I think anytime that you're setting up a new business line, you still have to go. Dude, it's like attention. There's like so much happening at all times, and I think that you need to be able to pierce those new channels, and also it creates competition too. In that sense. So I think like for us, like we are getting approached a lot of like, partnerships and inbound, but we're also looking at, what are other ways that we can grow our business? And again, going back to that concept I mentioned to you, like that's something that wasn't even in my brain like a couple years ago, which is like this idea of like, I'm in the business of like the moment that action occurs, our revenue kind of ends. Right. And that's fine, but if you could capture the lifetime value of someone through a product that you build that people like, so that could be a game, that could be a utility app, whatever, and that business in itself already has good cash flow, then you're basically creating like this insane kind of roll-up strategy, and you're kind of sending your consumers into a new product. You're getting those consumers, and you're creating a really strong network effect. And I think that's what you saw with Facebook and acquiring Instagram or acquiring WhatsApp. And not every acquisition needs to be a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Where we've seen a lot of opportunity has been like, there's just these random teams, man. Like we bought this product earlier here in January, had 150 million installs, about 2 million daily active users, and like 9 or so million monthlies. And the app was like doing like $4 million, almost $4 million in EBITDA a year, right?
Wow.
Team of four people, right? In overseas, total cost $15K a month. And I was just like, how is this possible? And then we vetted it. Like we went through the diligence, vetted it. We came up to a deal term. It was under 3x EBITDA, like the purchase. And, there's these opportunities out there, right? You just got to find them. And then now we're growing that product. We doubled its revenues. We kind of took all of our insights, and now we're creating that network effect. And so it's basically kind of rinsing.
You can introduce your users to that.
And their users to us. Yes. And then also then you have more spaces for advertisers to kind of like, do that. Then you take your know-how of like, data analytics, user acquisition, all the things that we know how to do, because the founders that are building these businesses, they've crushed it in some way. Like they found product market fit, but they may not be the most sophisticated in all these other areas, right? Just because you hit like, gold once doesn't mean that it's going to come again. It's kind of like, even think of my story when I was 22, right? 23 with my co-founder, we built some app that was literally spitting out $500-600K a month and free cash flow. I got lucky, it just hit it like, at that time. And so, and so I think that like, that's a really interesting opportunity. If you look, there's a company called, actually you should check out this guy, because I think like, you're a curious guy if you haven't heard of it, but there's Constellation Software. And this, it's like the billionaire that no one's heard of. He looks like Gandalf. His name's Mark Landord. He has this like huge Gandalf beard. And there's only like two interviews of his on the internet, like, right. And I tried to find all the content that this guy says, but basically he has built a $70 billion business. He raised $20 million once. That's all he's raised, and then built a $70 billion business that's publicly traded in Canada, right? And that's what's the most insane about it. But they acquire like 1,000 companies a year, and their business model is on VMS software, which essentially is called vertical market software. It's like they make super neat. They acquire companies that make super niche software. It's like, you make it for like tennis courts or tennis clubs in like Florida. And so there's not a ton of clients, but they're super profitable, but it's like $1 to $4 million businesses. These guys go and acquire thousands of those a year. And they have been able to do that for the last 20 years and have built a machine that just spits out so much cash and it operates in a very decentralized fashion. And so that's the type of stuff that's like really kind of inspiring, like where I see the future of mode going into, which is really like, we have this great ecosystem of opportunity where we have users, they're incentivized to go try out new products. You have, on the other hand, a bunch of these small little apps that, this is a great radio app, this is a great photo filter app, this is a great little game.
Yeah.
And they're cash flow positive. You bring those things together and then essentially create the network effect. And then you could create this monster opportunity across multiple different verticals.
But can't see, like, one of the things I always talk about too, one of my favorite things to do is when we are going to get in a new vertical, I simply find the best people that I can find in that vertical. And then I direct all of our existing client base to that vertical. And then when I can become more than 50% of revenue, we become their partner is what we do. So you can now do the same thing and acquire, like, you can say, hey, we'll push our people your little product. And then if it's working, you can roll them up.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially that's a publisher model. I mean, we're still experimenting with this and what this looks like for us. But, I think like a lot of, anytime you have a channel, like a medium of like the ability to bring people in, that's what creates that network effect opportunity, and you look at guys like Tony Robbins, for example, and I've done a lot of his stuff. It's like, you can kind of see that he's selling you in some capacity, but I almost don't mind the way he's selling it to me. But it's like, and if you do the core, it's like you see like all these different areas, and then he taps into all aspects of life. And each one of those was through a partnership, and then he potentially acquires them. But that's how, you have one guy who created one brand that then built a multi-billion-dollar kind of empire through all of these facets of kind of like, what it takes to have a whole life, which is whole thing. I mean, I'm not saying that we're doing exactly, his, but you can see that in many different plays, being played out. And that's how
I think you're seeing that all over the place, because that's like what Grant Cardone just did with Gary Brecka with the 10X thing. A little messy.
Yeah.
Apparently that's now working out, but it's the same idea. It's the same concept. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let's change, because you got your people all over the place. You're remote. Obviously, you guys have a high standard for what you expect out of your people. How do you hold that standard and create a company culture when everybody is scattered? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think like, we have, we've been doing it for like 5 years in a full remote, right? First, I think like, one thing I'll say is like, I had a much easier time running a fully remote company than a hybrid company. I think it's actually really difficult to run a hybrid company because some people have that in-office culture and kind of that rapport and whatever, and other people then don't because they're fully remote. And so when we decided to be fully remote, it was to embrace that and then create the best company we possibly could fully remote. The things that we do specifically around doing that, we brought in a chief people officer really early on. Like we had like 25 people, and then that person's like one of her main jobs is literally to almost create like an NPS internally. So we have anonymous kind of reviews of how the company's doing. And then you have like really strong core values around that. You've listened to the people's feedback, but also, we have crazy transparency within our business. So even when things were going awry in our business or going well, we have like a weekly, ACT meeting, which is actually the acronym for all of our core values. And that's basically a 20 to 30 minute meeting. So people know exactly how the business is going in the various departments. And then we have an all hands meeting, and it shows everything down to the financials of whether we're losing money, how much money you have in the bank. And so even in those difficult times that we had, during those periods of like 2022, 2023, when things are kind of coming up again, we only lost one team member, right? And we had to have a layoff that was like, we had 100 and some team members at one time. We had to cut down to like 50, right? And that was difficult. We did 2 rounds of cuts. And typically in those times, you see a lot of like your best people leave. And fortunately, we only lost like 1 or so team member, that we didn't, make that decision to go. And the reason is like, I think of that kind of like transparent culture. And then just, being able to, listen to people, see that their voice matters, and also being able to just kind of see your, internal, like how the, the saying goes, like I don't know how the pudding's made or something. Or I don't know, I'm forgetting like the saying, you know what I'm talking about though. I'm forgetting right now, but, anyways, like, so I think that's kind of like how has been really helpful. But I think also to just on more the operational time or operational side of things, we've been very focused on OKRs. And I was really, I'm not the most organized person because I'm much more of a visionary kind of thinker. We have a lot more
integrator. Yeah.
that are way more operational than me, I guess, in that sense. But I think like one thing I really forced on myself to have the discipline in is to operate with an OKR like framework of how we operate our business. So, departmental OKRs, ensuring that, everyone's really aligned on what they're supposed to work on, and then being able to kind of track those OKRs so that people know exactly what their goals are, ensuring that the managers get comped based on that. It's like, everything aligns to that. And it literally took us like 4 years to do it. It's so painful to do, to be honest, if you're not wired in that way. But I think that that's been one of the most impactful, important things, along with these other things that we've learned to create a good remote culture that allows for like, we have like a 80 to 90% satisfaction rate. And the average company is like 65% or something like that.
It's awesome.
It's our little tool that we use. And I think that those are all things that add up to be able to build like a great remote company. I mean, I would love to run a 1,000 person kind of remote company one day that fully operates, autonomously, in more of a decentralized fashion. And that's what I'm trying to move more and more towards as, we think about our business.
Well, I run a 600 person in-person company. So yeah, that's definitely, it would be what to do for sure. I have a question though. What is, and this has got to be tough, man, as a founder that's making good business decisions. What is the temperature within your engineering departments with AI moving as fast as it is? Is there a little bit of fear? Because I don't know if you saw it. There was a post that was going around Facebook yesterday, and damn it, I just forgot who wrote it, but it's a CEO of a major corporation, and he sent a letter out to all of his people.
It was the CEO of Fiverr.
You saw it? Oh, yeah, Fiverr. You saw it. Where he's like, AI is coming for our job. It's coming for your job. It's coming for my job.
Yeah. Well, I think even for that, I mean, honestly, I sent it to my co-founder.
Did you? Yeah. I posted it immediately.
And I was like, wise words from the CEO of Fiverr. And it was like, a special place for us of how we met. I mean, I think that, their business in particular, if you think about like, and he wrote it in a really good way. It was something along the lines of like, easy tasks, like what used to be easy tasks are like brainless tasks now. What used to be hard tasks
that goes away. Hard is the new easy.
What used to be impossible
is the new hard.
Right.
It's the new hard.
And I thought it was really well said. But I think if you think about their business, right, like what does that business thrive from? It's been like literally like stupid graphic design or not stupid, but like, make a logo. You know what I mean?
Easy stuff. Yeah.
Like, dude, you can do that with, chat. You know what I mean? So I think like, it doesn't impact my business as much as I would say theirs, because that's like kind of their core thing. The way that we've been thinking about AI internally is like, I've been really adamant about like all of our engineers should be using things like GitHub Copilot or whatever, because it basically makes like a 1x engineer like a 1.4x engineer, or and in some cases, if you're like a 3x engineer, it could potentially make you a 9x engineer. It just depends how well you know how to use it and how much you care about it. And so that's all about efficiency. The other component of it is how to basically make sure your business is smarter. We're starting to invest a lot more on that internally with our own tools and internal sets. And the way that we also think about like our broader core mission is around this concept around like universal basic income. And it's not that we're in favor of necessarily the government paying for that. It's like almost privatizing it, And so that's kind of like, what are tools that we can also provide to our consumers over time to allow them to earn additional income? Because now with AI, you could potentially create like, royalty-free music, for example, that other people can listen to and you could earn streaming on, or, products or whatever. And so how do we use this technology to enable earning and saving for our consumers in some capacity? That's how we're thinking about it into the future.
Yeah. A buddy of mine, it's funny you're talking about music. A buddy of mine just developed a brilliant AI platform. And essentially what it is the AI, he got together with a bunch of the top songwriters in Nashville, because he's one of them. And they all have AI bots of them. And you can go in the studio with them and write a song. And the cool thing about it is then that song can be used for anything licensed, but the songwriter
doesn't have to be a part of it.
No, gets credit for it, gets royalties for it. So as a producer, so like literally my buddy, they launched it up. I talked to him the next day. He's like, I wrote 800 songs yesterday. Dude, and who knows? It's really smart, because he's like, my AI that knows my tones and how I like things and how I would mix things and how things would go. I wrote 800 songs.
That's really interesting. It kind of reminds me actually of what's that number? There's a service that Masterclass. So Masterclass has like an AI that's like, it's like part of their service now is like, hey, you get basically the Mark Cuban bot or the, insert like professional Gordon Ramsay bot, whatever. And then now you kind of like get a fed from their brain, I guess. I think it's like super interesting.
I have kids tell me my cooking is shit. I don't need Gordon Ramsay bot to give me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they might get like, it'll probably actually also haze them, to be honest, in his case.
Yes. So, haze my children. That's what I need you to do, Gordon Ramsay. Haze my children. So what's the future, man? Where do you see this going? What's on the horizon?
I think like, we are, we're scaling, we're growing. I mean, this early part of this model has really been, of this last 2 years really has been around kind of diversification of revenue and, expanding our services and reach. And I think like, we did a super successful like Reg A Plus offering, which is kind of like a, retail offering, allows investors to, any retail investor to go through and invest in the business. And we got qualified by the SEC to do that. We brought in over 50,000 shareholders so far. And so have been able to raise nearly, over actually $50 million, just through crowdfunding, over the last couple of years. And so, we see consumers really interested and many of these people are not our target market. They're much more wealthy individuals, but they believe in the vision. So I think where the future is, we eventually want to take this business public. That's our, North Star and North Focus. But where we're going as a business, we believe that the phone will be free. We're the closest company to make the phone free. It's not an easy thing to do. So, we're still a long way, to kind of fully delivering on that vision. But I think that whoever can unlock that, that creates a, $1 trillion opportunity, because that is the one thing that we do the most. I mean, there's 168 hours in a week. If you're sleeping 8 hours, there's 112 left. And then if you check your phone and your screen time, people are spending anywhere from 40 to 50 hours a week. So 1/3 to 1/2 of your life is being spent on this device every single week, which is insane. And so I think that, if you think about that, what's possible, it's a really, really big opportunity. And, I think that we're just scratching the surface of where our story will be here in the next few years to come.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you want them to take a look at your Reg D or get your app, or do you have a centralized place where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to find information on the company is invest.momobile.com. You can also download our app and you can claim actually free shares. We're actually the first ever company that's ever been qualified to allow people to use their points to invest in the company if they wish. And so, our goal is to be the first ever company with 1 million shareholders prior to going public into the markets. And so the idea is to kind of build that ambassadorship, and we're taking basically users, turn them into earners, and the earners now turn them into owners. So those are 2 great places to go. You can download our product, get shares for free, no cost, or you can check out our site at invest.momobile.com and learn more, watch the content, and be a part of the community.
Well, dude, I love it, man. And thanks for joining us. If you're ever in Vegas, you let me know, man. I got you covered, whatever you need.
I'll hit you up. Yeah, I'll be there soon.
I'll take you somewhere where you can lose some of that money you've got. Well, guys, wrapping up today, man. The one thing that I would say you should have taken out of that is, if you want to be incredibly valuable, not just to yourself, but to other businesses, to what you're doing, capture an audience and be able to move them around to different ecosystems. There's a lot of value in that. Whether you're promoting a party in a nightclub or bringing 1 million users from one app to another. Because if you do it enough times and you do it right, apparently you'll have enough money to walk around with a Gandalf beard. So that's it. We'll see you next week. What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of Escaping the Drift. Hope you got a bunch out of it, or at least as much as I did out of it. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the show, you can always go over to escapingthedrift.com. You can join our mailing list. But do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind, throw up that 5-star review, give us a share, do something, man. We're here for you. Hopefully you'll be here for us. But anyway, in the meantime, we will see you at the next episode.